Leah, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And for everyone who's listening, this is Leah, my classmate from Juilliard. We studied together, but you did not apply as a high school student, did you?
No, I was there as a grad student.
Had you gotten your bachelor's in acting, or where were you in your life that you decided I want to audition for this program?
Yeah, I had just graduated the spring before that from the University of Evansville in Evansville, Indiana. It's like southern Indiana. So like a small private school, but they have like an excellent theater program. Um, and so I went there to study acting. I graduated in theater with a minor in international studies. It was a liberal arts school, so that was really great. I got to still do all the liberal arts classes, study abroad, and do a ton of theater.
Nice.
Um, yeah, so that's where I was coming from.
Did you know, like when you were kind of wrapping up at Evansville, that you were like, I'm definitely going to apply to grad programs?
They really pushed grad school, and so that definitely influenced me. I don't think I like going into undergrad, I didn't really know about a lot of acting grad schools or that was a path you could take. My sights were just on college, but they had a lot of connections with graduate schools and a lot of success in getting people into the top grad schools. So there were some people in my class who chose not to go that route of like the performance majors, but I kind of bought into it and went down that path. So I think I ended up applying to like 8 schools um, before graduation.
I'm interested to hear this list. And before you share, if you even remember all of them, but yeah, before you share, I want to know, because it sounds like Evansville had a lot of different. You minored in international studies. It sounds like it provided some more, dare I say, well-rounded opportunities. Like, did you, because there's a conflict, right? It's like, oh, I need that as a human as I'm developing as a young person, but also that can take away from like the rigorousness of the craft and really just skyrocketing my acting skills. So what were your thoughts around that as a student at Evansville?
I think that program, at least when I was there, was really excellent. And you really did get a lot of the feel of a conservatory while being in the liberal arts school. But I felt like I got that college experience and I needed that time to, grow up a little bit before I was ready for something like Juilliard. And then by the time I was auditioning for grad schools, I knew what I was going for, like that I needed that more intense vocal and physical training. Like I feel like I got a really good acting foundation at Evansville, and some of the voice stuff, but I didn't get that really intense training like what we got at Juilliard, and that's what I needed from the grad school experience.
So fun. So you decide you're going to grad school. What are these programs? Do you remember all the programs you auditioned for? And now remember, everybody, this is what year, Leah, that you're auditioning?
This was winter of 2005. So things have
2004 to
changed.
2005. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
definitely do not take Leah's list as like, oh, the 2022 list of schools you should apply to. I'm sure there's still some good ones on there, but yes, some
Yeah, there's
schools
some
have certain
excellence ones, but I think like I auditioned for ACT in San Francisco, and that one's just closed its doors. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of friends who went to that program, and that one's no more. Let me see. I probably remember most of them. I auditioned for ACT, the Old Globe in Southern California, UCSD, um, Brown, Yale, NYU, Juilliard. I think maybe the last one, I don't know if it still existed. Maybe it was a program at the Denver Center used to have a conservatory program.
I think
That
so.
might have been the last one. Yeah, and I ended up getting into 4 of them.
Wow. Okay. So you
Yeah.
remember. So I want to hear about this. Okay. So we're definitely going to talk about your preparation and kind of what happened, maybe even in some of these audition rooms, if you remember. But
Okay.
let's jump right to the end. Which ones did you get into, and how did you find out? Did they call you? Did they email you? What was your experience of like getting these acceptance letters?
I don't know if I remember exactly. I ended up getting into ACT, the Old Globe in San Diego, Brown University, and Juilliard.
Wow. Okay.
Brown Trinity. It's the
Yeah.
program with Trinity Rep.
Yeah, we know Brown. Yep.
Okay. So those were the four I ended up getting into. I don't
Did you
remember.
have any
I assume it was
feelings
phone
about
calls. I think it was phone calls for that process because
you
they're
just
notifying such a small group of people.
usually it's such a landmark feeling and moment when you get a call from the
Yeah.
top drama school. Were you just like too cool for school? What?
I feel like it must have been a phone call from Kathy Hood, right? And
Oh yeah.
I do remember that I was auditing a Shakespeare literature class from one of my favorite professors, and I think I got the call like right before the class was supposed to start, and I just started kind of freaking out and was like, grabbed my stuff and left the room and just kind of like bounced around the hallway and the theater office, telling anybody I could. But that
Was
wasn't when I knew. I didn't know that I was going to go to Juilliard when I was very excited to get in, but that wasn't like, it took me a while to decide what school.
okay. Oh my gosh. I just want to like talk about that. So again, we'll talk about Leah's process. We haven't skipped that. We'll get back to that, but I have to keep going with this thread because do you remember if you had a top choice? What was your deliberation process after finding out you got into these schools?
Okay, so I'm coming from the Midwest. I did not grow up in New York. I didn't necessarily have a ton of knowledge of the industry when I'm making these decisions. I grew up in Michigan. I went to school in Southern Indiana, and mostly what I had been basing my knowledge on is like seeing where the students that I admired in the three classes ahead of me, like the seniors when I was a freshman, where they ended up going. And because the school really pushed grad school, the two classes ahead of me, three of the actors that I really admired that I did Othello with all got into NYU and were in the same class at NYU. So like, or
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
actor that I really admired went to the Old Globe, and like, so I've heard about that experience. So that was really more, and they all seemed amazing in different ways because these actors that I really admired were going there. It wasn't necessarily like the industry says Yale and Juilliard are the best. In my head, they were all good in different ways.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think
Well,
they
yeah.
are. I think
Yeah.
they are. I think it came down, I think the Old Globe focused a lot on Shakespeare, and I had grown up doing Shakespeare. And I think I kind of, even though that one I think might have been paid for, they might have funded it. Maybe you taught while you were there, like it was funded in some way. I think I ended up nixing that one because I had done that, and I kind of felt like I needed to push myself out of my comfort zone and do more contemporary theater and kind of go in a different lane. And then I think it was really down to Brown and Juilliard. And Brown invited, kind of Juilliard does this now in a way, where they invite people for the callback weekend and you get to
Hmm.
experience the school. When we auditioned, they didn't do that.
Hmm.
So Brown did something like that, but it wasn't part of the audition. They invited everybody they accepted as kind of like, I assume like, we want you to come here, come learn about the school thing. So
Yeah.
we went, we did classes, we did like a clowning class with Chris Bays, we did, like different things, hung out with the current students, saw a show, and it was awesome. And again, I knew someone from Evansville who was there, so I got to catch up with him and like hear about his experience. And then I came back and I was like, well, I don't feel like I know anything about Juilliard now because
Wow.
I knew all the stuff about Brown now. And so I ended up maybe like on a winter break or spring break buying my own ticket to New York. Um, and Daniel Morgan Shelley, who I had done a summer theater program with the summer before, was at Juilliard. And he let me sleep on his couch, and I like sat in on an acting class. So I'd already been accepted. I sat in on Richard's acting class with Joanne. Joanne was there too,
Wow.
who was in our class, and went to a play reading and like tried to get a vibe. And I remember,
Self-explored. You gave your own self a tour.
yeah, and I think we can talk about this more later, but you need to audition this. They always talk about this, but you need to audition the schools as much as they're auditioning you and make sure it's right for you, right?
For sure. For sure.
So, and I also, there was an Evansville grad who was a fourth year at Juilliard, Regina Wesley, and she and I didn't know each other super well, but a little bit. And I, had contacted her and we had coffee or something. And I remember telling her like how I had spent this weekend at Brown and like it felt like home, like it felt like Evansville to me. And I remember she was going in to like go get ready for her show that night or something. And she came back and she was like, I just want to say, like, is that a good thing? Like, she said something to that effect. And I remember being like, yeah, I need to get out of my comfort zone and like do something different.
Wow.
And so mm, that was what I remember as being the decision.
That is incredible. I love that story. And it kind of speaks to some of the spirit at Juilliard. I mean, I haven't studied there since we did. We graduated in 09. And it's always changing and evolving, especially with new leadership. But like, there is such at least for our generation, it felt like there was such uh, like a desire to push, and it is like this was our opportunity to expand. And like we always tried to do scenes in scene class that were potentially rounding us out in some way, or reaching different varieties of our voice. Like it was time to do things we weren't used to doing.
Mhm.
And I feel that spirit. I remember feeling that spirit with the dancers, with the jazz musicians, and like just everybody. It was a culture of like, this is your time to expand. And it sounds like she was relaying that to you.
Yeah, and I'm so thankful. I do remember talking to an older friend who had gone to Evansville, who was like 4 years out of school or something, who was a playwright, and talking to him about this experience. And when I told him I was thinking about going to Brown, him kind of like being mystified, like being like, but it's Juilliard kind of thing. And like I
It has a
just didn't.
glow around it. It has to glow around it.
Yeah, but I'm kind of thankful that I didn't, like, thank goodness I ended up making the decision I did. But I wasn't making it from like, oh my God, the shiny name position.
You
And that's kind
definitely
of great,
had,
you know?
yeah, clearly you had a clearer eyed view than most people, including
Yeah,
myself.
it was just
But
another
it's like,
program.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just a sweet Midwest experience. Well, I got accepted into 4. Let's see what I want to do. So, all right, cool. Let's reverse. Let's rewind. Let's go to when you know you're going to be auditioning and you have to choose some monologues. You have some performance experience under your belt at Evansville and some classes, studios. You've got obviously a good foundation here. How did you choose your monologues? Do you remember how you found your pieces?
Well, like I had mentioned, they really pushed grad school. And I feel like our acting class senior year was focused around the grad school audition process. So we were using class time to like talk about it, gather material, work on monologues together as a class and with our teacher. Um, so I think what they really pushed was having like an arsenal of monologues. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
remember what
totally.
all of them were, but I probably had like 4 comedic and 4 dramatic and 3 Shakespeare. And you know what I mean?
Totally,
Like we were
totally.
armed to the teeth. And then you had your like couple favorite, but just in case somebody in the audition asked you like, do you have something that's a little more this or whatever, we had it.
Oh
So they
man.
really prepared us really well, I think. And I've
Yeah, I
heard
mean,
since then that sometimes people thought that people from Evansville were maybe a little too mechanical or something,
oh really?
maybe because of that preparation. But I don't know. It worked. It worked
I
for
don't
me.
know either. I don't know. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no. I don't know because I had the same experience, except mine was high school, not college. We had a incredibly rigorous high school. It was public high school, but it was just kind of an insane teacher, and we bought in. And yeah, we had at least, it was encouraged to have 4 to 8, but if you didn't have 6 or 7, you weren't serious.
Mhm.
And we had a really strong like technique, and we were really, we understood the basic principles of acting about, being in the moment, letting it live live. But at the same time, you have to make strong choices. You have to, you can't leave anything to chance and all this stuff. Some hot debatable topics for sure. But yeah,
for
if
well, for
nothing
me,
else,
I,
we
for me,
felt
I feel
prepared.
like intense preparation lets me be in the moment and go different places with it
Me
during
too.
the audition. Like the more I know it, as long as you don't get into that place of like being rigid, then part of the Juilliard audition was like, from what I remember, like, or the callback, I don't remember which, was like Richard asking me to do my monologues in a different way or with a different scenario of given circumstances. And so I allowed myself to do that in the moment, but having that preparation, I think, allowed that.
I think that's really wise, and I agree, because yeah, preparation. What do they say? Freedom within form. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you create that structure, you can play more freely within it, or recognize when you're going outside of it, and play in that realm too. Anyway, okay, so you're preparing your pieces. Do you have any? You don't have to say all of them, but do you recollect any of them? Like what plays, what authors?
I remember that my like dramatic contemporary one was Early Dark by Reynolds Price,
Wow.
which
Is
is
that
kind of,
that's an old play, isn't it?
I
Am
don't
I
remember when
wrong?
it was written, but it's an old fashioned play. And I'm someone who,
Okay, okay.
I'm not like the most contemporary actor. So I always tend to go for things that are like set in another time period.
Little vintage.
Yeah. And then for the Shakespeare, it was actually odd. Like it wasn't a play that I had done before. It was something from like one of the histories. I don't really remember if it was like Edward II or like King John or something like that.
Weird.
Um, it was someone like speaking over their dead husband's body type of speech.
Yeah.
But I think I
Do you
had
want
one
to just
from
address?
Kate, it's in from Taming of the Shrew. Maybe there was one I did for a long time, like even at Juilliard and at the end of Juilliard, which looks like a Phoebe from As You Like It monologue. I don't remember if I had that at that point.
This is overdone now. This is way overdone.
Yeah, I'm sure it was then as well.
The
I had a
most just
Juliet monologue. I think I did the poison speech, the Juliet poison speech,
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I
or the
think
potion.
when we
The
talk to
potion.
faculty members, yeah, the potion. When we talk to faculty members, obviously we coach students, and we see what they bring in. And between all of that information gathering, we've learned that the most overdone male monologue is Edgar. Remember the bastard speech?
That's so funny.
Yeah, that's number one. Number for the females, uh Phoebe is up there. I'm trying to think if there was another one. There's obviously less female Shakespeare monologues, but I think it's incredible. And by the way, that doesn't mean not do it, right?
Exactly. And I will
Sheldon,
say, oh, sorry, finish what you're going to say.
I was just going to quickly say, Sheldon in our class did To Be or Not to Be. you know Adam, I think, did Friends, Romans, Countrymen, or maybe, I guess, he did that at school. But I
Yeah,
remember thinking, like, these are overdone, these are all overdone pieces, for Shakespeare.
right. Well, I was going to say,
Okay.
like, when I auditioned for undergrad, I remember the marketing manager there was like sitting in on my first round of auditions, and then I had to do it for different faculty members. But she, and I didn't know it at the time, she would like talk to younger students and say like, well, Leah Walsh came in here and she did the two most overdone speeches. I did like the
What?
Juliet potion speech, and I did, again, I had never done a contemporary play until I got to college. So I think I had found a monologue in like a monologue book, and it was Star Spangled Girl by Neil Simon,
Yep.
which I guess is also, or was at the time, like very overdone. But she's like, but she did them and she did them differently, and like it didn't bother her.
Man, the artist comes through. The artist comes through. They actually, I got to give credit. We have to give credit to the panelists too, because they do intentionally try to look at these artists with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
There's
And
not a
if
lot
they
of
discount you because of what piece you chose, then
That's no good. They're not doing that.
they're
Yeah.
lost.
Their loss is rather the word. Yeah. So anyway, okay. So you're preparing some of these pieces, and you have this environment where you're preparing them pretty intensely. You've got a lot of peer feedback. Did you ever get like coaching outside of school, or any sort of like,
No, no.
how did you?
But we would do them for our teacher. We do them for each other. With Evansville, I think also brought in some. I think at the time, like the head of acting from ACT came and like kind of did mock auditions with us.
Nice.
Um,
So
yeah,
then
but
what happened?
nothing outside of there now.
Yeah, no, I mean, you had a great environment. It was already like, that's the environment you want.
They had a
We also
system.
had a system. That's a great way of putting it. That's very rare, as you probably know. And so if you have that, that's just awesome. Okay, so do you remember, like, did you audition? Where did you audition? And what were you remember feeling when you were like, that week before starting auditions?
I auditioned in Chicago. And the Juilliard audition was earlier for some reason. Like all the grad schools had auditions like the same weekend, but the Juilliard one was different. So, and a lot of my classmates didn't audition for Juilliard because it's a 4-year program and most MFA programs are 3. And that turned a lot of people off. It did not turn me off because I was home educated until college. So I hadn't been stuck in a school since I was 5 and just was like done. I was okay with an extra year. So I think only me and my classmate David, who eventually went to NYU, decided to go up for the Juilliard audition. So we drove up by ourselves and stayed with a friend and went, and then came back the next weekend for like all the other ones.
Yeah, no, same with me. All mine were at one time, and then Juilliard for some reason was at a different time. So like, to make it work where I could miss the least amount of school, I had to like fly to New York for all of them, and then I had to fly really quickly to San Francisco, nail the Juilliard edition, and come
Oh
home.
my gosh.
Yeah,
I don't think I realized you auditioned in San Francisco.
Yeah.
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 So
you're driving down to Chicago.
Yeah, we drove up from Evansville and stayed with a friend, and he, David and I kind of helped each other with our pieces and stuff.
You're saying in the car.
No, like when we got there, and like there's a lot of waiting
practicing
around, waiting around in like the hotel hallways and stuff. And I remember they were, I this was odd. It's not really important to your listeners, but I had like a medical event like a week or so before the audition. And I think it might have been stress related, but I ended up in the ER because I had a migraine. I had never had a migraine before, and I didn't know what it was. Oh my. So I felt like I was going out of my mind, like, because sometimes when you get really intense migraines, you can't see, like you're getting these auras around your vision. I was like kind of out of my mind. Like I didn't really know what was going on. I was sick, like pounding, and my roommate ended up taking me to the ER and they couldn't figure out what it was. Oh my gosh. Turned out it was a migraine. I think it might have been stress related. It might have been stress related on just like the stress of like, what's next in my life kind of thing. And so I was kind of coming off of that, which was an interesting place to be before auditions. I was just kind of feeling like raw and open, probably. Yeah. But I remember waiting for the audition. And this is another thing about my story that I have to tell you, and that plays into me getting into Juilliard, I think, is that I had done the Chautauqua Theater Conservatory summer program the summer before my senior year at Evansville. And that program at the time was run by Becky Guy, who was an acting teacher at Juilliard, and Ralph Zito, who was at the time head of voice and speech, was an Alexander teacher there. Wendy Waterman, who was a voice and speech teacher, was a voice coach there that summer. And so I got to work with those teachers. And so when I went to the audition in Chicago, Ralph was in the room. Mm-hmm. It was, Kathy was outside the room. Ralph and Richard, our acting teacher, were inside the room. And so that was a huge advantage. The fact that I went in and like, Ralph gave me a hug. It was a friendly space. I was still very nervous, whatever, but it was welcoming, and he knew who I was. He had some context for who I was. Yeah. And our classmate Jeff had a similar experience. And Jeff was with me there that summer. Yeah. And did you know Jeff that summer, or did you? Yeah. That's when y'all met? Yeah, we were there with Daniel Morgan Shelley, and like it was a class at Juilliard. It was like probably 18 people. Wow. And we had Jeff and I sometimes call each other fate mates because we're just like, so we keep ending up in situations together. So we wound up at Juilliard together that next year. That's a hug from Ralph. I got the
I
hug
did
from
not get a
Ralph.
hug from Ralph. No. But they still created a friendly. They were great at creating a friendly environment, no matter what.
Yeah. So I must have done my monologues, sang. I had some song from Camelot, I think. Um,
Oh, they asked you to sing in the initial audition.
they asked me to sing.
Did they do any adjustments, or do you remember anything that happened that initial
See, I
audition?
don't really remember what I can picture some of the things they had me do, but I don't remember if it was the callback or the initial audition. Um,
I want to hear, but just to remind our listeners, the callback weekend did not exist. So this
yeah,
was it,
it
right?
was the same
You
day.
have it's one long ass day, and that's their entirety of what they were judging. So if you say, yeah, so now when they, I don't know when they implemented the callback weekend, but
I think
it
it
was
was
after
at
Jim
two
became,
class. It was group 40 because it was after Frankie's class. Yeah,
yeah, and it
my
was
husband. Yeah,
yep, Frankie, and Jim was the head of the program at that time. I think
yeah, Jim
he
Hopper.
probably advocated or made the final approval to add this callback weekend. But yeah, we knew that, it was just going to be a callback and then potentially like an all-nighter, right? Did you
Well, it was
kind
a
of
little
have
different
that
in
in mind?
Chicago because I think it was just less people. So
Okay.
maybe at the end of the morning session, they posted who was going to be called back later that day for the callbacks. And then maybe at the end of the afternoon session, they posted another list or something. But David and I both got called back and we were like,
Oh,
what?
wow.
So we, like rushed away, freaked out or whatever. I think maybe they gave us like a essay question to answer about like an
Yep. Like,
important
what are your
theatrical
strengths? Yeah.
experience or something like that. So I remember we like went down to the lobby or something and we're just doing that. Um, and then we came back and it was me, David, Zach Villa, who was ended up in our
Oh,
class, and somebody else, another guy. I think I was the only woman who were called back for the day. And so it was only 4 people.
okay.
And then we did a bunch of
You guys
group
were throwing
things.
invisible balls to each other.
Yeah, like invisible volleyball or something. And Ralph stood us all in a line and had us repeat vowel sounds and things, which I had no idea what we were doing, and like could not hear the difference between what he was saying. I remember that. And then we would each go in and do the monologues again. And that was probably when I feel like Richard gave me some adjustment with my Shakespeare monologue. I think it was actually maybe the monologue was talking about my dead husband. It was like trying to get his brother or something to like avenge me and like my brother just died and how could you not do this or whatever. And he wanted me to play it as if my dead husband was like there on the floor in front of me.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
And so
That
I
is
did.
crazy.
And then I think that was the main adjustment that I remember.
That's crazy because as most people listening to this who might have heard my little story is that Richard also gave me an adjustment to see my dead father on the ground or whatever. I mean, it was he
This is a classic Richard Feldman. I mean, hey, it'll get you to the point
adjustment.
of everything.
Yeah, it really
Just trying
gets
to
you
see
there,
if you
doesn't
can
it?
like access some emotion, I guess.
Oh my God,
That's
no, mine was
hilarious.
like, I was like, he's like, imagine instead of talking to your best friend here about your dad, imagine that your best friend is like over your shoulder and you're at your dad's gravesite. And he totally changed the environment and had it
Yeah.
incorporated my dead dad. I'm like, of course I was playing it in the moment, but hearing you say that is hilarious.
Uh,
Okay, so you totally killed it.
I guess so.
They didn't ask you anything else maybe about like another piece, or was it mostly just the Shakespeare piece?
I don't remember. I think I did both of them, but that's the only part I remember.
Amazing. And then you got a call. Do you remember if you got a call like pretty soon, or was it like over the summer after you had finished all the other school auditions?
I mean, it was before school ended for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was in the next, I don't know, the
because
next,
they had to do San Francisco, and then I
right.
think they kind of, yeah, it was obviously I was in San Francisco, so it was pretty soon. They were the first ones who called me.
Yeah, it all had to be in that same, since I wasn't getting in off the wait list, which would have been later, like it's all around the same time, because then you have to decide, know all your options before you can let somebody
Yeah,
know,
amazing. Wow. So that's cool. That's cool to hear. I love it.
Yeah.
Anything else? Let's think about some of the listeners who are auditioning now, and they're are auditioning for Juilliard and other top schools, BFA, MFA. They have varying levels of experience, maybe no experience, maybe a lot of professional experience, whatever it may be, or maybe they're coming out of school above their bachelor's program, just like you did. What do you think is important to remember when you're going into these drama school auditions?
I think, like I mentioned before, like auditioning the school as well. And I don't mean being like awkwardly forward about like grilling them or anything, but to do your research, to know what you're looking for, like allow yourself to be surprised, but also to know like what do you really want? How do you want to grow and learn from this experience? And look for the programs that are going to help you with that, you know?
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And then in terms of preparation, like with the art and the performance aspect of things, maybe handling nerves, or what kind of contributes to being able to deliver good work in the room rather than like sabotage yourself, or is there anything you can think of that would help deliver the best work?
Um, hmm. I think, yeah, anything you can do to find a way to stay like focused and calm in the time when you're like waiting around, waiting for your audition, put your phone away, listen to the music that like gets you in the place for your monologues or whatever, like stay focused. Don't be on Instagram. Um, just
Yeah,
try to
definitely.
try to like stay in the mindset of whatever your first piece is, kind of thing. Like not in a too intense of a way, but like stay ready.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. Do you remember what you did in the waiting room?
Um, I think I might have had like some very melancholic poetry I was reading or something for my like my like hurt lover monologue that I was doing first or something, like
Staying ready.
conjuring up old heartbreak or something like that.
Love that. Love that. Yeah.
And definitely
I
like
agree
listening to
with.
music. I love having like a song.
That's great. That's great.
But
I was
I also remember like making sure a moment like when she wasn't busy, like asking Kathy questions about like what does a day for a first year look like at the school, like asking about things I wanted to know.
great. Cool. Well, this has been great. I loved hearing your story, and I loved kind of seeing the journey. It's clear, like um your kind of trajectory, and it's fun to hear all the little nuances of your journey.
Thank you. Can I give a little plug for my podcast?
Yes, absolutely. Please.
Yeah, if you guys are interested, I'm not making it anymore. I ended it last year, but I have 7 seasons of the Compass podcast on iTunes or the Broadway Podcast Network. And it all deals with what artists do to keep from going to the dark side. So a lot of life stories.
A lot of really good stuff there. Talking to, who were your guests? Are just artists in the
I would
profession?
say early and mid-career artists, all different disciplines, but a lot of theater artists.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really good. So I didn't know actually that it ended.
Yeah, I ended it
and
last May.
and is this well, we can talk offline probably, but no, it's great. 7 seasons. That's incredible.
7 years, yeah. 7 years.
Wow. Cool. Yeah. So it's on the Broadway Podcast Network, or you said what
iTunes,
else
yeah.
channel?
You can find it on iTunes.
Compass Podcast, people. Leah's the host. Okay. Any final thoughts? Any words of wisdom before we depart?
Well, I know you're trying to stay focused on the like getting into school thing, but I would just say, yeah, find ways when you're in school to keep an eye on like the kind of artist and the kind of art you want to make when you're out of school. I had an amazing time in both schools I went to, but I do wish I had had a little bit more of my mind on the world outside of the school. That's not the whole world. The program is not the whole world.
Great. Brilliant. I agree. I agree entirely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Leah. Well, with that, we will say goodbye. And for everyone listening, if you'd like to connect with Leah, she has her information on her podcast, the Compass Podcast, where you can reach out to me and we may be able to make a connection. Thank you very much, Leah.
Thank you.